Hi, this is the fifth continuation video for example sums on the topic of past adjustments. Let's go to the example. Example 10. A, B and C were partners. Their capitals were A rupees 30,000, B rupees 20,000 and C rupees 10,000 respectively. According to the partnership deed, they were entitled to an interest on capital at 5% per annum. In addition, B was also entitled to draw a salary of rupees 500 per month. C was entitled to a commission of 5% on the profits after charging the interest on capital, but before charging the salary payable to B. The net profits for the year were rupees 30,000. This was distributed in the ratio of the capitals without providing for any of the above adjustments. The profits, however, were to be shared in the ratio of 5:3:2. Pass necessary adjustment entry showing the workings clearly. From this problem, we find that the errors are: the first error is that the profits of 30,000 was distributed in the ratio of the capitals, which is 3:2:1, which is a wrong ratio. The profits ought to be shared in the ratio of 5:3:2. That is the first mistake. The second mistake is that IOC at 5% per annum was omitted to be allowed. The third mistake is B was not given the salary of rupees 5,000 per month. And the final mistake, C was not given his commission. Since the profits have been distributed in the wrong ratio, the very first step would be to reverse the profits which have been distributed in the ratio of 3:2:1, which is the ratio of capitals, which is a wrong ratio. So we'll begin the working note, which is the table showing adjustment to be made, by reversing the profits in the wrong ratio. Working note. Table showing adjustment to be made. Particulars. Partner A divided into debit and credit. Partner B again divided into debit and credit. Partner C divided into debit and credit. And the last column for the firm divided into debit and credit. We'll begin by reversing the profits. Reversing profits. The wrong ratio is in the ratio of capitals, and the ratio of the capitals is 3:2:1. It's basically 30,000 is to 20,000 is to 10,000. On scratching the 4 zeros, we get that the ratio is 3:2:1. So I'll reverse the profits in 3:2:1. The profit amount is rupees 30,000, which is given over here. So for reversing the profits, we need to debit the partner and credit the firm. A's reversal of profits is equal to 15,000 For B, it's 10,000. And for C, it's 5,000. Total 30,000 to the credit of the firm. Next is to allow the interest on capital at 5% per annum. Allow interest on capital at 5% per annum. On applying the 5% on the capitals of the partners, which are 30,000 for A, 20,000 for B, and 10,000 for C, we get 1,500 for A, 5% on 30,000. For allowing IOC, we need to credit the partner and debit the firm. So 1,500 for A, 5% on 20,000, which is 1,000 for B, and 5% on 10,000, which is rupees 500 for C. Total IOC rupees 3,000 to the debit of the firm. Next is to allow salary. The salary to be allowed is 500 into 12, and we need to give the salary to B. So 6,000 credit of B, we allow salary. Total 6,000 in the debit of the firm. Next step is to allow commission. As far as the commission is concerned, it says C is entitled to a commission of 5% on the profits after the interest on capital but before the charging salary payable to B. So the profits is 30,000. We'll deduct the interest on capital, but we will not deduct the salary. So we'll deduct 3,000 and we get 27,000. C is entitled to 5% on this amount. So C's commission is equal to 1,350 rupees. So we'll give C his commission. For giving commission, we need to credit C. The total is 1,350 debit of firm. Now we've corrected all the errors. We will balance the firm. The greater total is 30,000. We need to subtract the total of the debit from this amount. The total of the debit comes to 10,350. So on subtracting this, we get 19,650 rupees. So that I will enter the debit of the firm. This 19,650 should be divided in the correct profit sharing ratio of 5:3:2. So on dividing, since it's coming in the debit of the firm, we need to credit the partners. So the amount for A credit will be 19,650 into 5 divided by 10, which is 9,825. Next, the amount for B is 1965 into 3, which is equal to 5,895. And the amount for C is 1965 into 2, which is 3930. So since we've credited the partner, we'll write in the particulars column distributing profits, and this has been done in the correct ratio, which is 5:3:2. Our next step is to find the total. A debit total 15,000, A credit total 11,325, B debit total 10,000, B credit total 12,895, C debit total 5,000, and C credit total 5,780, and the firm debit total is 30,000 and credit total is also 30,000. Next step is to find the net effect. A, the net effect is 3,675 debit. For B, it's 2,895 credit, and for C it's 780 credit. So for the solution, we'll assume that the fluctuating capital method is being followed and pass the journal entry through the partner's capital accounts, date, particulars, LF, debit rupees and credit rupees. We need to debit A's capital account with 3,675 rupees to B's capital account, credit B with 2,895 rupees, and to C's capital account we need to credit C with 780 rupees, and the narration being adjustment entry passed to rectify the error. So in this problem, we saw that the profits was distributed in the wrong ratio of 3:2:1, apart from omitting IOC salary and commission. So the first step, we reverse the profits in the wrong ratio by debiting the partner's capital and crediting the firm, and then allowed the interest on capital, salary, commission, etc. Example 11. Capitals of A, B and C as on 31st March 2019 amounted to rupees 90,000, rupees 3,30,000 and rupees 6,60,000 respectively. Profit of rupees 1,80,000 for the year ended 31st March 2019 was distributed in the ratio of 4:1:1 after allowing the interest on capital at 10% per annum. During the year, each partner withdrew rupees 3,60,000. The partnership deed was silent as to profit sharing ratio, but provided for interest on capital at 12% per annum. Pass the necessary adjustment entry showing the working clearly. On reading the problem, we can identify that there are two mistakes which are made. One is that the profits of 1,80,000 was distributed in the ratio of 4:1:1. But however, the partnership deed is silent as to the profit sharing ratio. So the correct ratio is equal. So between A, B and C, the correct profit sharing ratio should be 1:1:1. So the profits have been distributed in the wrong ratio. That's one mistake. And the second mistake is that interest on capital is provided at 12% per annum, but instead in this firm interest on capital has been given only at 10% per annum. So we need to allow interest on capital for 2% per annum. Now as far as interest on capital is concerned, the 2%, we need to apply it on the opening capital. Obviously, the capitals of A, B and C is given 90,000, 3,30,000 and 6,60,000 is at the end of the accounting period. It says there it's on 31st March 2019. So since we are following the fluctuating capital method, we need to calculate the opening capital from the closing capital. So let's do that first working note to calculate the opening capital from the closing capital. We need to do this because we need to allow interest on capital at 2% per annum. We have provided only 10%, whereas we were supposed to give 12%. So the first working note, working note 1, calculation of opening capital. Particulars: A, B and C. Let's begin with the closing capital. The closing capital of A, 90,000 rupees. For that of B, 3,30,000. And for C, rupees 6,60,000. We need to add back the drawings. So add drawings. It's given that during the year each partner withdrew 3,60,000. So we'll add back 3,60,000 for each partner. So we get the answer for A as 4,50,000 rupees, for B as 6,90,000 rupees, and for C as 10,20,000 rupees. The profits have already been transferred to the capital accounts, so we'll deduct the share in profits. The ratio in which the profits have been distributed is 4:1:1. So on dividing 1,80,000 in 4:1:1, so we divide by 6 and multiply by 4. So we get 1,20,000 for A. We get 30,000 for B, and we also get 30,000 for C. Now to get our opening capital, we need to deduct the interest on capital of 10%. But to get the interest on capital at 10%, we need the opening capital. So we can't get either one without the other. We cannot get the amount of interest on capital without the opening capital, because we need to apply the 10% rate on the opening capital, and also to get the opening capital we should have the interest on capital of 10%. So we'll stop the calculation with this and say that the answer for what we get here is opening capital plus 10% on the opening capital. So the answer for each of these partners which we are going to get right now is not the opening capital alone, but the opening capital plus the 10% of the opening capital. So for A, that amount is 3,30,000. For B, that amount is 6,60,000 rupees. And for C, that amount is 9,90,000 rupees. So let's assume that the opening capital is equal to X. So for partner A, X plus 10% of X is equal to 3,30,000. So 110 divided by 100x is equal to 3,30,000. Therefore X, which is nothing but the opening capital, is equal to 3,30,000 into 100 divided by 110, which is equal to rupees 3 lakh. So to get the capital of B, opening capital, we'll take 6,60,000 rupees into 100 divided by 110, which is rupees 6 lakh. And to get the opening capital of C, 9,90,000 rupees into 100 divided by 110, which is equal to rupees 9 lakh. So now that we've got the opening capital, we will go ahead and do the second working note. Which is table showing adjustment to be made. Particulars: A divided into debit and credit, B divided into debit and credit, and C divided into debit and credit. The last column for the firm divided into debit and credit. The profits have been distributed in the wrong ratio of 4:1:1, and the correct ratio is 1:1:1. So we will, first step is to reverse the profits. Reverse profits 4:1:1. For reversal of profits, we need to debit the partner and credit the firm. We debit A with his share of profit 1,80,000 into 4/6. We debit B with B share of profits 30,000 and debit C also with 30,000. Total profits 1,80,000 to the credit of the firm. Now interest on capital at 10% has already been allowed. The correct rate is 12%. So we will allow 2% IOC. We need to apply the 2% IOC on the capitals of the partners. The capitals of, I am underlining it in a different color here. The capital of A is rupees 3 lakh. The capital of B is rupees 6 lakh. And the opening capital of C is rupees 9 lakh. So on applying the 2%, we get IOC in the case of A is equal to rupees 6,000. For B, the IOC is rupees 12,000. And for C, the IOC is rupees 18,000. So we need to allow this IOC. For allowing the IOC, we need to credit the partner and debit the firm. Credit A with 6,000. I'll credit B with 12,000. And I'll credit C with 18,000. The total is 36,000 in the debit of the firm. The error has been rectified. The greater total is 1,80,000. After deducting 36,000 from 1,80,000, we get 1,44,000. The correct profit sharing ratio is 1:1:1. So each gets 1,44,000 divided by 3, which is 48,000. I have debited the firm with 1,44,000. So I will credit the partners with this amount. 48,000 for A, credit. 48,000 B, credit. And again 48,000 C, credit. Since I have credited the partners and debited the firm, I will write here distributing profits. And the correct ratio was 1:1:1. The next step is to ascertain the total. A debit total 1,20,000. A credit total 54,000. B debit total 30,000. B credit total 60,000. C debit total 30,000. C credit total 66,000. And firm debit and credit total 1,80,000. Net effect 66,000 debit for A, 30,000 credit for B, and 36,000 credit for C. Let's go ahead with the solution. Solution. We followed the fluctuating capital method. So the rectification adjustment entry should be passed through the partner's capital accounts. So journal, date, particulars, LF, debit rupees and credit rupees. First April 2019, A's capital account debit, $66,000 to B's capital account 30,000 rupees into C's capital account 36,000 rupees, and the narration being adjustment entry passed to rectify the error. So this sum is slightly different. Some students may even find it confusing. The problem was that we needed the interest on capital to find out the opening capital. But however, the opening capital was necessary to find out the 10% of interest on capital. So we had to equate it as 110% of opening capital is equal to each of these amounts. For A, 3,30,000, for B, 6,60,000, and for C, 9,90,000.